impact video. It's not numbers and figures, which of course you can always find right in a report, but it's really testimonials from people that have attended our programs. And I do think that, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so a video would be like millions and trillions, right? So yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy the video and have just a little bit more of a visceral understanding of the work that we do and the impact that we have, right? And play the video. And then we move some out.
Fab Lab is absolutely a valuable resource in our El Paso community to inspire children to move beyond anything that they thought possible before.
Tech Frontier opened the doors for me, and even though I had no background in any of it, I walked away a little bit better than I was when I came in.
We really couldn't have done this project without Tech Frontier, without their expertise in terms of 3D printing and scanning and being able to teach those technical skills to these students.
Hi, my name is Sarah and I teach at Logan Elementary, 5th grade. I decided to bring Halo to the camp because it just seemed like a really exciting experience for her. They provided the children not only tools to learn themselves, but also created spaces where they could work together with other students that they didn't know before. And that's an invaluable resource as these children move into adulthood, the ability to communicate and work together.
My name is Halo, I'm 11 and I go to Mount Haskins. Learning at the camp was way more better than learning at school because it was more like with activities and it was all easier to remember and it was more fun than just work. I think Fab Lab should have more programs like this because it gives kids like a fun way to express themselves and learn like different careers and what they can do when they grow up and like how to work together with other people.
They don't get these opportunities in the regular public education school setting. So for children to be able to come out and have these opportunities to explore, and given the expertise of the people working with them out here has just been invaluable, not only to Halo, but I'm sure to everybody else that was in the camp.
My name is Diana Maldonado Rocha. I'm a representative for District 3 for the City of El Paso and a capacity analyst at Accolade Incorporated. I participated in a 5-day digital discovery week through Tech Frontier, and actually that was really interesting for me because part of it, you know, we did some VR, we did some block coding, we created a portfolio, we created a mapping for everything that we had to create, and I think a lot of the times people that are either my age or a little older that have no background in technology find it a little scary. Where when you come and you're actually brought into this digital discovery week, you really understand it's not scary. You just have to add some creativity to it and you are able to create some amazing things. What it did for me is it gave me more confidence in my abilities to be able to navigate in the technology world. Also, it just was a great place to collaborate with people that I probably would have never collaborated professionally before. And that's the beauty of things, is that you expand your community and you really expand your network. And I find it absolutely amazing that you all can offer these things and these classes to adults for free. I feel that El Paso has a huge opportunity to become a technology-friendly city, even more than they are today. So as a city representative, I find extreme value in the Tech Frontier programs. For me, there's always constituents that are always looking for resources, looking for opportunities. Tech Frontier is actually, I feel like, ground zero for all of that.
I first met Michael Nelson, the Director of Operations for Tech Frontier, at one of the El Paso Community Foundation's cultural roundtables. And Michael was talking a lot about the different work that Tech Frontier was doing at the time, and he mentioned some projects related to accessibility. And I had been thinking separately about how the museum really needed to do some work in terms of making our collection more accessible. At a museum, of course, a lot of the items are behind glass, they're not meant to be touched. So for visitors who are vision impaired or blind, it can be not a very engaging experience unless they have someone there who can kind of tell them everything that's behind the case and read the text panels for them. So I reached out to Michael and we started talking about doing the summer camp with high school students. And so during the camp, students spent half the day here at the museum learning about the principles of exhibit design and about the history of accessibility movements in the United States. And the other half of the day with Tech Frontier, learning about how to do the 3D scanning and printing and how to model those items. And then we would work with high school students and replicate some of the objects that are behind glass and have them 3D printed so that visitors can pick them up and engage with them and have a more kind of tactile experience with visiting the museum. It was really about exposing high school students to the concept of accessibility, of universal design, and having them understand the ways in which these skills that they're learning related to STEM and STEAM education are applicable in the real world and can really make a huge difference in people's lives. Part of this summer camp was having these students engage directly with an individual from El Paso Council of the Blind to be able to speak to her and understand what her experience is like navigating El Paso as someone who is vision impaired, and what the limitations really are in terms of being able to visit something like a museum. And so she came to the exhibit opening at the end of the week, and afterwards she sent a really beautiful email. It was very emotional, talking about how this experience really removed a lot of the frustrations for her that come with visiting a museum when you are blind or visually impaired. We received the Gold Award from the Texas Association of Museums because this project really showcased what can happen when different institutions, individuals, community groups come together to organize around a particular challenge in our community. So it's really awesome to be able to have this collaboration between a humanities institution and a STEAM institution.
To the people that supported this program, I just want to commend you on what you've done for these children. It is an invaluable opportunity that these children have. Fab Lab is absolutely a valuable resource in our El Paso community to inspire children to move beyond anything that they thought possible before.
We want to start investing in our future. We want to start investing in the kids, and I hear it all the time with constituents. I don't want to move to a digital platform. I don't want to, I want paper. I understand that, but sometimes we have to just show them.
Being able to see all the different ways that tech influences our lives, the many different ways that STEAM plays into, again, even in an institution that's very humanities focused, like the History Museum. I think that that's a really valuable resource for our community, something that we really need to embrace.
That's inspiring. That's a beautiful video. Go ahead. Were you gonna?
No, I mean, I was just going to say that, you can already see just from the video that it is a highly interdisciplinary organization. And I always have the super hard job of having to talk about the work that we do, right? When people are asking, well, what is Fab Lab? Or what does Fab Lab do? And I'm like, okay, all right, let me tell you about it. Like, how long do you have, right? Because there's so much that we do. But it's all united by a common value, right? And I think you guys will hear it a lot throughout your education, in the business school, that every enterprise or every endeavor has to be value driven at its core. There's a mission, whether it's a for-profit and startup or a nonprofit and social impact org. You have to really understand what your value is, what your value add is for your stakeholders in the case of nonprofits, for your shareholders in the case of for-profit companies. For us, it's very much value driven. So we do disparate things, disparate programs. We run a whole spectrum of different learning programs and workshops, but at the core, it's all united by our value and our vision for El Paso.
Cathy, watching that video, it's very inspiring. It really is, and I don't just mean that, because you've touched up on so many different populations within our own community. There was a need. Somewhere in the community, through those 3 different stories, there is a need. Even now, we see a lot of change happening in the schools that will impact what they're getting in the classroom, and why more than ever, nonprofits like Tech Frontier are going to be more important. But what motivates you to reach the masses that we've seen? And how does that inspire you to keep doing more? Because from what I've seen, it's not just the end, right? It's the phone call that your employee got from the museum curator that says, hey, I have an idea, can you help us meet this need?
Exactly.
It's the teacher who wants to further educate her students, knowing that they can only go so far in the classroom. And it's the representative who says, my constituents want, I need more, and I know that they're capable. So it's all these touch points that someone has just by coming in contact with your organization. So what serves that motivation and inspiration?
So for us, it's, I think like one of the really unifying values is accessibility. And I mean that in every facet of the word, right? Accessibility from the perspective of socioeconomic barriers, accessibility from the perspective of physical impairments, accessibility in the sense that, we're really trying to create not only an environment for people to, improve their skill set, but it's also to improve their mindset. So this is something, I say all the time, it's like we're really trying to change, we're trying to create an environment for skill set and mindset. I think in our community sometimes, and especially with, our parents' generation or older, but sometimes it's even our own generation where we're here all the time, we hear all the time people say like, oh, I'm not a tech person, right? And so they've already mentally opted out of something that is very much an embedded part of our reality, as much as, it's a double-edged sword because like any tool, it can be used for the benefit of all of us or, or for nefarious like purposes, right? It's like the bad actor sort of theory of tech. And I feel that, you really can't just live under a rock and not even contend with this reality that we all live in, especially at the pace that tech is accelerating and the ways in which these technologies like AI is permeating every single aspect of our lives. And I think to just turn that off or not even try to understand, right? You can try to understand and be like, that's not for me, and try to opt out, but of course that's very difficult given the way that things are configured in our lives. I think that it's just, we're trying to create that accessibility for people to either see themselves as part of the tech economy, which, really is driving the broader economic development and growth of our country, and, but also to just see themselves as having some type of ramp to understand something as rudimentary as, say, cyber safety, right? So it really runs the gamut from, we do really high level AI software development classes. We also do digital discovery week,
I need one of those.
Right, where it's just a lot of hand holding. It's for people who are we're trying to take them from zero to hero, right? But in a way that's welcoming, accessible, and makes them feel that they're not being talked down to. And so it's just creating that spectrum of engagement, which I think is what's unique about our organization.
Sure.
And is unique to the fact that we are a nonprofit, right? At the scale at which we operate, we're agile enough to be able to pivot quickly to address a myriad of needs from the community, whereas, institutions or organizations that are bigger, it's kind of like steering a boat. In order for things to change or in order for them to respond to community needs or the changes in the market, it takes a little while, right?
Sure.
So that's what makes my work unique and the organization.
Absolutely, and I think traditionally, and maybe many of you will agree with me, El Paso tends to be a little bit slower than most cities when it comes to moving forward with some of these more technologically advanced projects or simply ideas, or whether it's in the classroom, in the businesses. So how do you feel Tech Frontier has contributed to forwarding the economic development on that side of businesses where you're helping them discover and really, I guess, kind of explore their own creativity, right? When it comes to
I think, again, I really do think that, it's definitely an ecosystem, right? And I think what my vision for the role that we play within that ecosystem is an on-ramp. And what we really need is we need good handoff points to other partners who can then take the organization or the student or the individual to where their final destination is. And that's something that we don't necessarily do very well in this region, is that I think either organizations or institutions want to be like the be all end all for people, right? And they just want to have total ownership of that pipeline. But it takes a village to do the level of digital transformation and growth through a burgeoning tech ecosystem. It takes a lot of different actors to scaffold their resources and to collate their programs and their training in a way where you're really, taking someone, you're providing a wraparound service for them to really, take them into this tech-enabled future.
Right.
And so for us, we try to be that first step, right? It's like if you think of it as a metaphor for a party, we're the ones who are inviting people to the party. Now it's up to other organizations to also provide the entertainment for people to want to stay at that party, right? We can't be the only person doing all of that. But I do think we do a good job of just helping businesses who, I think businesses more or less understand the importance of that digital transformation.
Sure.
Just to, it's going to be a very competitive market going forward, given the economic climate that we're entering.
Sure.
And I think that everyone knows, right, that tech is important. But what they don't know is, well, how can I take advantage? Or how can I gain that competitive edge? Or how can I streamline my operation through tech or empower my workforce with tech so that we can meet the challenges or meet the volatilities of the future.
Sure.
And we give them that introduction into this is how we can get you started, so that they at least have a framework to think through their challenges.
Give us an example of one of the companies you've worked with where you've implemented what you just described, where you've come in and said, we can teach you how to do this.
Well, so this work all started during COVID, which makes a lot of sense. I would say the first organization that we really worked with that is, I think, exemplary of what I just discussed would be the city of El Paso. So we were approached by them during COVID to provide digital transformation training for their small business team. So we did a train the trainer model for their digital transformation specialists, and we had a 3-module program where we taught them everything from e-commerce to better ways of collecting data and leveraging data for again, it was a train the trainer model, and it was one of the first programs we did where we were now teaching adult learners. Most of the work that we had done prior to that was K-12.
Right.
But it was surprising how well that worked out, because we translated our approach and our educational pedagogy from teaching youth and kids. And it's wait a minute, adults also want to have fun when they're learning. Who would have thought that having fun and having hands-on activities would improve learning outcomes across all different ages, right?
Sure.
It's it seems like such an obvious statement in retrospect. I guess hindsight is always 20/20, but it's if you treated adult learners and didn't just think, oh, because I'm dealing with a bunch of adults, we're going to just have a really boring black and white slide presentation with no visuals, right?
Sure.
And instead, if you really took the same approach and distilled a lot of the best practices that we had from our K-12 programs, and we implemented a lot of them, we shoehorned a lot of them into the ways in which we do continuing education and digital skilling for adults, had great outcomes, right?
So it sounds like you learned a lot about yourselves as an organization during that time as well, right?
Yes,
it was a
absolutely.
transformational time for what you as an organization were able to offer.
And then the next project that we did soon after that was with Medical Center of the Americas, where we helped them develop a similar set of digital transformation workshops, but this time it was geared towards innovators in the medical device industry. And it was funded by a San Francisco fund called the Workers Lab Innovation Fund, and also was supplemented by an EDA grant. So that was like, I think it just, once you get the ball rolling, and almost seems like the digital specialist training we did for the city was like a pilot, and because it was so successful and we had such good feedback for that program, then it became a springboard for us to jump into more of these opportunities to create bespoke digital transformation training for other organizations,
Right.
and other innovators, right, in other industries and spaces.
I love that. Let's keep on the line of talking about teaching, whether students or adults. I was reading on your website, and one of the things that really stood out to me was this concept of failing forward. And I love that. And it's really so simple. But what you talk more specifically about is creating these learning environments for students where they're encouraged to ignite their creativity, but more than anything, fail forward. Talk to us about that concept, why that's so important, and how you integrate it into your learning environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's a very tech startup mentality, because you hear it a lot in the startup world, where it's like fail fast, and fail fast and fail often. But and I think it's that concept of that's so diametrically opposed to the way that formal education, right, like deals with students or sets student outcome expectations, because like the word fail is like the F word, like don't say that, right, in any of the K-12 like schools or in the ISDs. But for us, it's a great word, because every time you fail, it means one, you tried, and that's step one, right? Nothing is ever achieved if you don't even make the attempt. And secondly, I think it's not so much the act of failure, but really what you do with all the information that you now have after you have failed. And I think that that's really the secret sauce for any student or anyone who's a lifelong learner, is that there's no 100% success rate for anything that we do.
Right.
But I think there's just that cognitive disconnect between the ways in which students are being taught to think in formal ed and then how the real world actually functions, right? So like the value of Fab Lab and Tech Frontier is like a safe space for students where, we're also helping them mirror some of the ways in which, this is how the real world is going to work. Like even as professionals, as we step into our roles within industry, I have failed plenty of times in my role, right? And I've had my team members who have tried something they thought really was going to work, and it didn't work. And so how do we contend with that? How do we deal with that? And it's something that we don't talk about as a society or community very much. We celebrate all the successes of everything we do, right? But I sit here in front of you guys today with like a million failures. And and for everything that went right for us, and for every moment that we're like, oh, this is something, a kernel that we can distill, there were at least 10 moments where we're like, what are we doing? Like, it's, everything's on fire, and like we don't know what's going on.
And that's a great segue to talking about, as an entrepreneur, what were some of those challenges opening a startup and learning about your identity as an organization of what you wanted to be and what you wanted to represent. Tell us about some of those challenges and maybe how you had to pivot, maybe even about face, right, through some of those.
Yeah, so I think, the challenges, a lot of the challenges were very early on. I think one of the biggest challenge for us was that we thought we were our own target audience. And what I mean by that is, obviously I'm a very interdisciplinary person, I'm a very proud nerd, and I'm already a techie, right? I'm already someone who loves technology and is like a proud digital native in the sense that like I grew up being very tech enabled and tech empowered. And I was like, yeah, Fab Lab, it's for people like me. And then it was a very rude awakening when I realized, oh wait, like people in the community, they were like, what's Fab Lab? Like, you know? And I always like to tell this as a funny anecdote, but when we first opened our doors in 2014, we would always get these phone calls from people that would try to, like, they would be like, oh, are you Fab Lab? I'll be like, yes. They'll be like, okay, do you accept blood samples or urine samples? And I was like, excuse me?
Like, not that kind of lab.
Right, I'm like, I'm not that kind of lab, but that really was the only kind of lab that El Paso was familiar with a decade ago, was like, oh, you're a clinical lab, right? And, you know, now it's a whole different reality for this region. A decade later, I think we're a lot more aware of just, you know, the potential for our region in like manufacturing and digital fabrication and like, you know, advanced manufacturing and all of this. There's a lot more momentum like collecting around these things. But yeah, 10 years ago it was a rude awakening. So we really then afterwards thought really long and hard about, you know, how can we meet the community where they are.
And how did you do that? How did you find out what the community, where they were at, what they needed? What steps did you take?
So that's where I think like this was something very unique to this region, is that because you know, we are a region where it is low wage, low income, and I think for a lot of the families that we met, right, the overwhelming question was, what do you offer for the kids? And it's kind of like bittersweet, but I think it's something also very real about immigrant communities where the parents are so interested. They're maybe not interested in investing in themselves because it is expensive, right? It is expensive to like, you know, go and take a workshop on 3D printing, and they're like, well, maybe that boat has sailed for me, but I know that this is important and I want my kids to learn about this. And that was the like overwhelming feeling that we got from all of the people who did come to Fab Lab, was this question of what programs do you have for my son or my daughter?
Sure.
And so that's where we started, was by offering like very tailored K-12, you know, STEM enrichment programs that were very high quality, very engaging. We were not afraid to take it to the next level. We were not, you know, it was not just like, oh, I'm gonna just, you know, buy a STEM kit and like, you know, you're gonna assemble something, you know, superficial that you could have just done at home. It was a very unique experience for every student that came through, and we established like a personal relationship with all of these students.
Is that how the partnership with La Nube came to be?
Yes, but I think it's because, so the La Nube partnership, yes, I would say that the start of that partnership definitely was because one of our first supporters in the region was El Paso Community Foundation. They were our fiscal sponsors for our 501c3.
Okay.
Even before we officially got our 501c3 status, El Paso Community Foundation stood in as our umbrella like sponsor. And they've supported us for a decade, just in terms of helping us increase capacity and connecting us with the physical infrastructure that we needed in order to grow. And so La Nube was a project that we were asked to be part of that from the very beginning. Like I saw the blueprint and they were like, this is the space that we imagined for you guys. So it was
So from inception?
From inception, yes. Like I was involved in that project since like day one of when they brought in the founding CEO for La Nube. Like I worked with him. I did a hard hat tour when the building was still just, you know, basically a cement structure with like no walls, just a bunch of scaffolds. And it was very windy, and I almost died falling off one of those scaffolds.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank goodness you did it.
Yeah, no, it was an adventure for sure. We did one of the first hard hat tours that they offered with the Texas Gas Services One Gas Foundation board members, and I just remember like climbing the scaffold with them and being like, oh my god.
Yeah, no. We saw recently you were in Houston, I believe, with NASA.
It was Austin, actually.
Austin.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what that trip was like for you, but I think that also kind of makes us wonder what you're working on outside of El Paso that you're hoping to either bring in, integrate into the border city. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question because it's a segue for me to talk about some of like my favorite memories with the org. So in 2022, we became one of 21 official NASA community anchor sites. So that was our first federal grant that we received also. And so through that grant, right, we did a bunch of workshops, and it is with a K-12 focus because it was with NASA's Office of STEM, just celebrating different NASA milestones and missions. And I think because we, were so unique, we became sort of involved and then got invited by the American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics, AIAA, to go on an all-expense-paid trip with 20 of our students to Cape Canaveral to witness the Artemis I launch. So we took 20 students with us, 20 students, and none of them have ever left El Paso. None of them have ever traveled outside of the city of El Paso, and they were all nervous, and some of the parents came with us as chaperones, and it was just, it was amazing. And when we got to Florida, we were treated like VIPs. We went to, we were able to talk to a lot of the STEM facilitators at the Kennedy Space Center, and we, after a few touch and go moments, because with launches, it's always, you never know if it's going to happen or not until the very last minute. We got to see something that was truly like life-changing, I would say. This historic mission of us returning to the moon.
Right.
Of course, the Artemis I launch is not manned. It was just a test flight of the rocket, of the SLS rocket that they built. But for Texas Space Day, which I attended just a few weeks ago in Austin, I was able to meet Colonel Hatfield. He is going to be the commanding pilot for the Artemis II mission, and he is absolutely amazing. He's super handsome and a Texas gentleman, and just all around incredible. He's been an astronaut on multiple missions before to the ISS, and now he will be commanding this second mission on Artemis II, but they're still not going to land on the moon. So Artemis II is slotted for, I think, April of 2026, and they're just going to be doing a loop-de-loop around the moon and then coming back to Earth and hopefully landing safely on the Orion capsule. And then in a few more years after that, the Artemis III mission will be the official return to the moon since the 80s. So I'm a big space nerd.
I mean, clearly,
that's
amazing though. I love it.
And so it was just really amazing in terms of our region, right, and the importance of why we all should be really excited about space is that El Paso is part of now what is starting to become, Space Valley. So, we got Space Coast, but now the West Texas region, right, from Van Horn to El Paso, there's a real potential in terms of talent, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of just the geographical benefits, right, of this region, that we could really be the next hub for all types of space economy related businesses, services, and so for us, right, it's about, again, it's how do you build that cultural shift? How do you build that mindset shift so that we see ourselves, right? We need to be able to almost sort of will it into existence because we can already manifest it in our own minds that we're part of that and that we're going to build the future. And so a lot of the work that we're also doing is, of course, preparing the workforce talent necessary to capture the value from that type of investment, whether it's on a state or federal level. And also just, a lot of this ties into the K-12 stuff as well, because we do want students to be interested in the opportunities that Paso have to offer. Right? Like, we all know that brain drain is a huge problem for our region. And so to do that outreach early on in middle school and high school, and just, map out a future for really, really talented individuals in our community, of which there's a lot. I'm looking at all of you guys here right now, right? To understand that there is a future here, and it could be a very, very bright future for us, but we need to invest in ourselves, and we need to, invest in each other.
Great segue to my last question, because I want to leave some opportunity for our audience members to ask. But for the students and even faculty and staff in the audience, what opportunities do you have for them to engage with Tech Frontier, whether it's on the maybe internship or workforce side, or whether it's through benefiting from any of the services that you offer through your workshops or anything like that?
Absolutely. I love that question, because actually I wanted to call out Laura. She's actually a volunteer with Tech Frontier, and I when you walked in, I wanted to see how you were feeling, because she helped us with our big annual fundraiser gala on Saturday, which was a huge success. We played a custom game that we developed. It was a tech loteria. So if you guys know, loteria is like Mexican bingo, to put it very crudely, but much more beautiful than bingo, obviously, with the like sort of artwork.
The characters.
Yes.
And what?
But we sort of like reimagined the images to be all of these terms related to tech. So we had a really great time. Like, again, it's about just envisioning ourselves, being able to imagine this region, the rich heritage and culture of where we came from, but then to project it forward into the 21st century workforce and economy, right? But yeah, so we have volunteerships, internships, we have opportunities for engagement. Our organization is small but mighty team. We do so much with the number of staff that we have. It's kind of crazy, and as we grow our reputation and as we have more successes under our belt, we of course get more opportunities, right? But the only way for us to capture those opportunities is by leveraging again the talent and passion of individuals in the community who want to contribute. So yeah, you can always reach out to us. We're always looking for students to help us, even if it's just volunteering at an outreach booth at one of the many community events that we attend. That would be a great way to just give back to the community, but also expand your own professional network, right? Come and meet people and get inspired by really talking to community members. I think as business or marketing students, we all understand the concept of you really need to get to know your users, right? And the only way to really understand who your users will be, or who the potential customers are going to be, is there's no better way than to go out and talk to people and really get to know them.
I love that. Great note to end on. Thank you. So we're now going to open this last few minutes that we have to the audience. Any questions that you all may have? I know you do. Yes.
What were some of the challenges that you faced from going from concept idea to realization?
I think we just really started out with a concept that was not I think fully rooted in the reality of this region, and so we really had to play it by ear a lot of times. And there was a lot. To this very day, even 10 years later, it still feels like I'm still testing so many things out. And a great way to do that is through pilot programs, right? That way it's very low stakes. And we even pivot sometimes midway through programs if something is not working well. We try to stay agile enough where nothing is written in stone. And again, that's the beauty. I think that's probably one of the biggest advantages of having a smaller program where you're able to be more experimental, right? It doesn't work in an institution like UTEP where you have a set curriculum. You can't just scrap that curriculum midway through your class, even if, say, students are not doing well or they're not really understanding it. For us, we can do that because ultimately we're very like outcome driven. So how we get there is not as important as just like actually helping somebody understand the material any way that we can.
Next question.
Okay. Well, let me think a little bit on how I want to structure it.
Oh, okay.
But basically, so right now I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm starting my own business. I want to make my own machine shop in Juarez and also in Paso. And right now I'm focusing on 3D printing and resin.
Awesome.
So my question for you is, in El Paso, how do you see the additive manufacturing industry going on here in the workplace?
I mean, I think it's probably going to be one of the central pillars of our advanced manufacturing infrastructure. I don't know if you guys haven't had a chance to go and visit I think it's the Additive Manufacturing and Aerospace Center, AMAC at UTEP. It just opened. It's where the Aerospace Center and the Keck Center now is located, and it's a state-of-the-art facility, right? And it just goes to show you, like, anytime you want to know where we're headed, just look at where the investments are being made, right? Where are the incentives being aligned to? And it's all being aligned around advanced manufacturing. So additive is, again, a big component of that. I would encourage you to also look at what El Paso Airport is doing at the Innovation Factory. I know that a new round is opening up for applications, specifically for manufacturing startups that have the potential to be able to produce parts for defense contracts, right? But it's not like, okay, you have to go from 0 to 100. Like, there's plenty of resources to help you step up your operations so that you are ready. Like, the ultimate goal is to, be competitive enough for those defense contracts here locally in the region. But, there is a lot of resource and support that the city and UTEP and other stakeholders are providing. So yeah, I mean, I think that, you're on a very high growth trajectory if you think hard about what your value add is, because it is also, I feel like the barriers to entry have also lowered a lot for additive. Before it was just this huge capital investment, and now printers are like a fraction of what they used to cost. So you got to think really long and hard about, right, like, what is your unique value add? That you're not just another dude with a bunch of 3D printers, right?
Is there any conflict between your nonprofit status and entrepreneurship? Mine says because it's not your money, right?
Right.
So you say I want to scale up, but so you have any conflict?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that people have about what a nonprofit is, especially in El Paso, because most nonprofits in El Paso are involved in direct services, right? So they're when people think nonprofit, they're oh, El Pasoans fighting hunger, right? A food bank, or animal services where you're helping animals. It's all direct giving. It's all very remedial, where you're addressing an immediate need for someone. And I think there's a really poor understanding of oh, so how does a nonprofit work if you're not necessarily giving a man a fish, you're teaching him to fish, right? But in a way, it is the same way. So with nonprofits, instead of shareholders, we have stakeholders, right? And nonprofit does not mean no profit. I think that's the biggest sort of misunderstanding that people have is oh, you're a nonprofit, that means you can't earn any money, right? That means you can't have you can't have profit, right? False. In order to build sustainability for any nonprofit, you have to have a working business model. If your business model for a nonprofit is, oh, I'm gonna give away 100%, right? If I get $100 in programmatic funding and I'm gonna spend $100, you're going to be constantly on the cusp of, going out of business or going out of operation. Sure. And you'll be subject to every volatility in funding cycles. So for us, it was always very important to have like a working business model that diversified our revenue. So for some of our programs, yeah, we generate income. Like we have programs where we charge, right, students or participants who can afford it or can like expend that. Like we do charge like money for our programs, and then there are other programs that are funded by specific companies or by large grants, and those are free or very low cost to participants. But I mean, there is nothing in the book that says that you cannot make a profit. It's the only stipulation is that profit doesn't go to shareholders. That profit gets reinvested back into the organization.
So you position yourself as kind of complementary to EPCC or maybe UTEP?
No, I would say like we're more of an enrichment, or we bridge the gaps that maybe formal institutions find hard to bridge, right? Just like I talked about EPCC, UTEP, great institutions, but institutions can't do everything and they can't do things fast enough sometimes, right? Especially in tech when things are like changing every minute. How do you come up with a curriculum for AI when like the technology is evolving so fast, right? How do you teach someone, how do you like develop a course around something that is constantly, like it's a disruptive technology and it's constantly evolving? So that's where we come in, is we're trying to bridge the gaps that's left behind by formal educational institutions. And that's worked as a very powerful sort of like niche for us within the ecosystem.
So with the development of the AI, the degree that we now have here at the institution, how are you partnering with the university to, I guess, identify any gaps and fill the needs that we may have, whether it's through co-curricular
I think for us, it's really like, because for us, it's really about providing opportunities for folks who are even just dipping their toes, right? Like they don't really know. I mean, not everyone's gonna be like, oh, AI, okay, I'm gonna commit now to like a 4-year degree in AI. That's not a reality for a lot of people, right? There's also a lot of working professionals who are already in a specific role and they're just looking for some kind of digital certification. They're not looking for another degree. And within tech, especially within computing, that's very common. Like people get hired based on what they can do, not what diploma they have, right? So it is a lot more like, it's a skills badge sort of like approach to employability as opposed to like degree based or diploma based. And so I would like to have more partnerships with UTEP.
Sure. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some very successful partnerships in the past. I'm also on UTEP's College of Education's board, advisory board, and it's just, but it is hard in the sense that I think we occupy just different areas of the ecosystem, and
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
I have two, don't I?
Okay, sure.
What tech skills or technology would be crucial for us UTEP students to know or be aware of to prepare for the next 5 years or upcoming years? Because everybody's getting older. So like, and it's kind of crazy because I have like a sibling that she's graduating in high school and I'm like about to graduate college. So it's like we're all kind of levels to this. What should we know, or what tech skills do we need to know or be prepared for the future? To be honest, that's my question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it's always really tricky when you're trying to read the crystal ball, but that's sort of what I have to do in order to. I always like to say that one of the things that we really try to do is we try to teach for the skills of the future, and not just teach people for the gaps that exist right now in our class team. Because it is a little bit scary in the sense that I do think things are going to radically change in the next 5 to 10 years. I think a lot of the ways in which we do business is going to change, and those changes are very much going to be informed by automation and AI. So I think like understanding how to use AI as a productivity tool is going to be more important than ever. And then also understanding, like, just being, like approaching it with a critical eye and an analytical mind, because, you know, AI is also, like, think about what are the positions that are the most ripe for automation through AI, right? Like, think about that question, like, really sit with that question and ask yourself, like, is what I'm doing something that can be done by a machine, or by, you know, artificial intelligence, or by a machine learning algorithm? If so, what value am I adding as a human, like, actor, right? As a human, like, part of this interface, like, what value am I adding, or what do I bring to the table? And, like, I think that is really the question that would differentiate between someone who would be future ready and someone who is not.
I have another question, sorry. What characteristics have you developed over the course of your journey as becoming an executive director? And yeah, that was a question, so I thought it was part of that.
Can you just repeat that? You said it
Sorry.
wrong.
What characteristics have you developed over the course of your journey as becoming an executive director?
Characteristics. I would say that I am probably, you know, I do think that I am more comfortable saying no to people. Because, you know, like, growing up, like, I'm also, my parents are immigrants, right? And as Asian Americans, like, we definitely try to be the model minority. We definitely try not to, like, always say yes to everything and always be the people pleaser. And I've really just had to realize that I have to set my boundaries. And at the end of the day, it's about protecting the integrity of the organization and, you know, being strategic about your partnerships, being strategic about what information you are sharing and not overshare, or maybe, you know, also, but at the same time, not withholding and undersharing and sandbagging a project. So just like all of the nuances and delicacies of when to say no, and you know, but when you do say yes, like, carry that forward with authenticity and with a generosity. Just being able to read all of that is, like, something that I really had to learn. But I think that it's a really important part of being a founder or being a, you know, business owner, is that you have to navigate what those boundaries are and negotiate what those boundaries are.
Thank you.
Final thoughts from the audience.
I hope you guys enjoyed.
This was wonderful. Yes.
For having me. I love talking to UTEP students. You know, there's just so much, as I was walking in, I was saying there's just so much talent. It's a different level of like, work ethic, I think. I think there's a different level of really understanding what the realities are that we have to contend with. I think just UTEP students are very real. They live in the real world, you know, and I think that that's definitely the biggest competitive advantage of the talent that we produce in this region, is that, you know, we don't have anyone who has their head stuck on a cloud. Like, everyone is very rooted in how things work and the materiality of what we're surrounded by. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Cathy. She didn't say no to us. So thank you for that, Cathy. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned, this is our last program of the semester, but if you don't already follow us on social media, we are the Mike Loya Center. Please follow us on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. That's where we promote all of our programs. You're going to see a fabulous lineup for fall. We're really excited. We're already working on a lot of initiatives. So please follow us. And if you don't mind, we do have the QR code here for a brief survey. We'd love your feedback as we put our